Renata Flavio's son fell seriously ill and required surgery. Renata was a single mother. Her husband had passed away 2 years ago from the same illness. At that time, their son was 8 years old and deeply affected by the loss. A few months ago, he fell ill himself. The disease had been passed down to him. Now Renata was desperately fighting for her son's life. He was her only child. Renata had married early, she had just finished school, and she was only 18. Her future husband had struck her with his looks. He was a handsome man. Renata herself was renowned for her beauty in their small town. She was a very attractive girl with long black hair and big brown eyes. All the guys chased after her, but she kept everyone at a distance, believing that none of them were worthy of her. Yes, Renata looked down on everyone and repelled them with her coldness and aloofness. She had very few friends. She was predicted to have a career as an actress, singer, or model, but things turned out differently. When Renata saw Javier, she fell in love with him at first sight. The man, who was 17 years her senior, also fell madly in love with the girl. They began a passionate romance, and within a month they announced their engagement, and another month later they had a lavish wedding. Javier was a wealthy man and spared no expense on the ceremony. Everything was unfolding like a beautiful fairy tale. The newlyweds went on a vacation to the islands and returned from there happy and even more in love. Renata became pregnant almost immediately and gave birth to a beautiful son. She had to forget about her career, but the girl was happy, and she loved her roles as a wife and mother. Her husband adored her. He worked a lot, and his business brought in a good income. When their son grew up and turned 4, Renata wanted to do something else. She had always enjoyed drawing, and she thought about studying to become an artist. Her husband didn't object, and Renata started attending art classes to prepare for exams and enroll in college. Everything was going perfectly. The teachers praised the girl and said she had a bright future. Renata got into college and happily immersed herself in her studies. Now she had everything she dreamed of: a beloved and loving husband, a child, a home, and an occupation that made her feel alive. Renata felt happy, and every day brought her joy. The only thing that slightly saddened Renata was that she had no friends. Her school friends lived far away. Renata and her husband had moved to the capital as soon as they got married. The other girls in her group were younger, and Renata didn't know what to talk to them about. Besides, she still behaved quite reserved and aloof. Of course, her son went to school, but even there, she couldn't make friends with other mothers. They had completely different interests. However, Renata wasn't too desperate. All her time was devoted to family and creativity. In her final year, she was offered a job. After defending her diploma, she was ready to be accepted as a painting teacher in a children's art studio. After consulting with Javier, Renata agreed. She would have her own business and her own income, which she could spend as she pleased. How could it get any better? Renata looked forward to the future with joy and anticipation. And then the unexpected happened. Javier fell seriously ill. All the money he had saved for a new house and expanding his business had to be spent on treatment. But it didn't help. Javier faded away like the flame of a thin burning candle. Renata couldn't believe what was happening. In less than 6 months, Javier went from being a young, flourishing man to a feeble old man. Doctors couldn't do anything. Javier passed away. Renata bitterly mourned the loss. She never took her exams or defended her diploma. She had to quickly find a job to support her son. Her parents helped her as much as they could, but Renata didn't want to depend on them. She understood that she was alone, and now all the responsibility for her son lay on her shoulders. A year passed, and the woman managed to somewhat improve their financial situation. She had enough money to pay bills and her son's school fees, buy clothes for him, and even go to the movies on weekends, to children's entertainment centers, amusement parks, and the zoo. Life was slowly getting back on track. Renata even started painting again, indulging in it during her free time. The wound left by her husband's death still hadn't healed in her heart. She loved him very much. She poured all her pain, loneliness, and unexpressed emotions into paintings of profound depth. Everyone who saw them promised Renata a great future, speaking of her talent. She was already thinking about her own exhibitions when suddenly a new misfortune struck. Flavio fell ill. Renata felt horror. She was afraid that history would repeat itself and the boy would also leave her forever. She knew she wouldn't survive another loss. Doctors said they would do everything they could, but they couldn't avoid surgery. A lot of money was needed to make it happen. Renata found a second job, but it still wasn't enough. So, she started selling the things her husband had given her. They were golden decorations that were dear to her as a memory. She would never part with them under different circumstances, but now she had no choice. Moreover, Renata reached out to her former college professors asking them to find buyers for her paintings. They empathized with her situation and promised to help. It wasn't even a week before a fairly wealthy patron called Renata and bought all her paintings. The girl was very grateful to him, but the money collected still wasn't enough. Renata was on the verge of despair and put her house up for sale. Every day she visited Flavio. The hospital where he was located was only a couple of blocks away from her workplace, so as soon as she said goodbye to her last client, she grabbed her bag and walked to her son. Once, right in front of the hospital, she stopped at a traffic light and noticed an old lady nearby. She was trying to cross the road on a red light. Apparently, the grandmother was very old and didn't understand what she was doing. Perhaps her relatives were already looking for her. Renata approached closer and asked loudly, "Do you need help?" The old lady looked at her, and Renata noticed tears in her eyes. "I got lost," she admitted. "My granddaughter and I went to the store, and she asked me to wait in the car, but she was gone for so long that I got worried and went to look for her, and then I ended up here. I need to find my granddaughter." Renata took the old lady by the arm and, when the light turned green, led her across the street. "What was the name of that store?" "Oh, I don't remember anymore." "Some big one. There was such a bright shop window." Renata thought that maybe it was the huge supermarket on the corner and led the old lady there. As they approached the store, the girl immediately noticed a young woman darting around the parking lot, wringing her hands and calling out a name. Maybe that's the old lady's granddaughter, Renata thought. She led the grandmother to the girl. Seeing them, she stopped and smiled joyfully. "Abuela, there you are. Where did you go? I've been looking for you for half an hour." The old lady smiled sheepishly, like a mischievous girl. "I was there," she said, waving her hand in the direction they came from. "I hope you didn't cross the road on a red light?" The old lady put on an innocent face. "No, of course not, sweetheart. This young beauty here helped me a lot." The girl thanked Renata, and she smiled and nodded in return. Handing over the old lady to her granddaughter, the young woman hurried to the hospital. Flavio must have been waiting for her by now. Renata didn't know that someone had been watching her closely all this time. When the girl reached the hospital and entered the building, he waited a little and followed Renata. The next day, the young woman had a day off, her first in months. She didn't want to take it, but her boss, an elderly gray-haired man named Senor Gonzalez, insisted. "If you keep working at the same pace, you'll end up in the hospital bed next to your son." "Is that what you want?" he asked sternly when Renata came to hand him some documents. The girl shook her head. "Then please make sure I don't see you in these walls tomorrow. Go for a walk in the park or read a book. And don't even think about taking an extra shift at your second job. I'll find out." Senor Gonzalez was a kind and fair leader. He sympathized with the young woman, knowing her story. Senor Gonzalez himself had lost his wife early and never recovered from the loss. He was still lonely and spent almost all his time at work. However, he didn't want the same fate for Renata. The next day, the girl woke up at 10. Fatigue was taking its toll. She got up and went to the kitchen to make herself some coffee. The hospital's admission hours started after noon and lasted until the evening, so the young woman didn't have to rush and could dedicate a few hours to herself. However, she couldn't stop thinking about poor Flavio, who missed her terribly in the hospital and kept asking his mom when he could come home.